What is going on, everybody? Welcome into the reveal of the number 30 team in my 2021 NFL Power Rankings with a deep dive into the Jacksonville Jaguars. Before we get started, you guys have been showing up big time, hitting that like button down below, so I appreciate if you could just take a second to hit that thumbs up down below. It really does help support this series and spread the video. And if you're new here, you will not find a deeper, more comprehensive preview of the upcoming NFL season for all 32 teams. So make sure you subscribe and turn on that notification icon down below so you don't miss any more Power Ranking deep dive reveals as we go. So the Jacksonville Jaguars have kind of had the dream offseason, if you will, for Jaguars fans. You obviously get the consensus generational quarterback in Trevor Lawrence. That alone is going to generate some excitement. You bring in the sort of legacy head coach, Urban Meyer, kind of implementing this brand new culture here, kind of purging the entire staff with his guys. And then just as far as the roster turnover, yeah, there's some starters on their way out, but there's a lot of poor players getting starting time last year. Those wouldn't even be considered key departures. They just brought in a lot of better football players that are going to replace those guys and be upgrades. So overall, just a positive offseason. You could nitpick here or there, and I'm not going to act like Urban Meyer would have been my choice for head coach here. I don't think it was a terrible hire. He's not really a X's and O's guy. Yeah, he'll say have a say in the offense here, but it's really going to be up to him working with Darrell Bevell to run the offense. Joe Cullen going to kind of implement the defense. He is taking more of that CEO approach, which absolutely can work. I just personally prefer your head coach to bring something to the table schematically. And, you know, I think if you're, say, Detroit, you can go with an Urban Meyer to kind of reset the culture, but you just brought in Trevor Lawrence. This team has expectations to get winning and have a top head coach immediately. And I just don't know if Urban Meyer is going to be an elite NFL head coach. I think he can reset some things. But in 3 years from now, are we going to be happy with Urban Meyer as the head coach here? I don't know. I think that's up for debate, but it wasn't by any stretch of the imagination a poor hire. He knows how to build a program, which is what they're ultimately trying to do here. So, like, you can nitpick that. You can nitpick some of the signings. You know, was Rashawn Jenkins overpay? Could they have done more in the draft or free agency? Yeah, absolutely. You can do that for pretty much anyone. But overall, it was a very positive offseason. So we kind of mentioned the coaching staff there, and we'll talk about more of the schematics and stuff as we go. You bring in Trevor Lawrence, you get Travis Etienne in the draft to continue to upgrade that running back room. Marvin Jones, a veteran wide receiver, is going to come in and start as your Z receiver on the backside. Significant upgrades in the secondary as well as a massive focal point of this offseason, as it was an abysmal unit last year. You bring in Shaq Griffin from Seattle, Tyson Campbell early on in the draft, basically a first-round pick there with the 33rd overall pick, and Rashawn Jenkins at safety to play, you know, kind of a hybrid safety role here. And it's hard to say exactly what kind of safety he's going to play, strong safety, free safety, that kind of stuff, but we will get into that when we dive into this defense. And then Roy Robertson-Harris, an underrated player that they added as well, kind of that flexible hybrid defensive end type to fit into this, what's going to be a hybrid defensive scheme here with Joe Cullen. So obviously just kind of a complete overhaul this offseason. This team was the worst team in the NFL last year, and the question is going to be, how do these pieces all mix together? That's going to be what we talk about as we move forward here into the roster and the scheme and the staff and all that stuff. But, you know, it's going to be heavy expectations here. Not necessarily to overhaul it overnight, but to show significant promise by the end of the first season, I would say, and have those expectations in year two with a quarterback prospect like Trevor Lawrence coming in here, that they can be a playoff contender, I would say, in year two of the Urban Meyer regime. So let's talk about how realistic that is, how all these pieces are going to play together, starting with that big quarterback picture here. And Trevor Lawrence coming in, no doubt he's the day one starter. He is, as I said, a unanimous generational quarterback prospect. And because he had that hype, oddly enough, we didn't get a lot of time and platform to dive into Trevor Lawrence, which is the beauty of this series. So what did I think about Trevor Lawrence? And what do I expect from him in year one as a rookie? I expect him to be a top 15 to 20 quarterback in year one. I think the traits and the accuracy that make him that generational prospect, you're talking about elite arm talent, top 6 or 7 arm strength, just arm talent in general in year one, the second he got drafted. And he has outstanding accuracy. He has that ability to not just throw with accuracy from the pocket, but put the ball wherever he wants, whenever he wants, throwing off platform and stuff as well. So you pair that with, I would just say, above average processing and decision-making ability for a rookie quarterback, and you're just going to get a very nice baseline. I think Trevor Lawrence's floor is really high, and is part of what makes him so generational is that, no quarterback is bust-proof, but it's very difficult not to see him at least like a Jared Goff, Kirk Cousins with wheels, and being a top 20 quarterback at worst day one as a rookie. So that's like worst case scenario. And then you throw in the athleticism that he brings to the table, and you are, I think, looking at a top half quarterback just in year one. And honestly, if by the end of the first year he wasn't at least in consensus conversations as a top 10 quarterback, that might be a borderline disappointment given the expectations there. So I would say if that doesn't happen, if he isn't viewed as a top 10 quarterback by the end of the year, I would say my two biggest criticisms or weaknesses on my scouting report of him were, number one, I would say that his processing is fine. It just, as all rookies have, just has room to grow. So can the Jaguars, elevate that as he goes throughout the season? That's going to be a question for any rookie quarterback. But more specifically, he actually has some pretty rough times over the middle of the field. And I think it comes back to that arm talent. He just has so much confidence that he can rip it into windows. And even at the college level, you saw linebackers get their hands on a lot of footballs over the middle, especially on RPOs and play action. I think Trevor had so much confidence that those guys were going to come up and bite the cheese that he would try to rip it over their heads, and those guys were able to drop back and get their hands, and led to some turnover-worthy plays and just pass breakups in general. So that's something to keep an eye on in year one. And then beyond that, I would say it's not necessarily a weakness of his, but I didn't quite consider it a strength, and that's just the overall pocket presence and manipulation of the pocket, knowing how to sense pressure and use his feet to know when and how to extend plays and stuff. And again, it's not that it's a weakness of his, but even just in this class, I look at, for example, Zach Wilson, and even to a degree Mac Jones. I felt like those guys were much more natural movers in the pocket. I would not also describe Trevor Lawrence as a quick twitch athlete. So if the tackle play is poor here, which is very possible, we'll talk about the offensive line in a little bit, that could be something that holds him back. And you could see a lot of strip sacks and times where you're like, oh, Trevor, you got to step up there. You got to, do a little bit more when your tackles get beat. So those would just be my negative notes on him if he doesn't become a top 10 quarterback in year one. Those would probably be the things I would project to be the reasons why. But those are pretty nitpicky, and you'd have to have a lot go wrong for him to not be, I think Matthew Stafford is a great comparison for Trevor Lawrence, but there's no reason he can't be better than that and become Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Aaron Rodgers, in that top elite echelon. The sky's the limit for Trevor Lawrence. It's why he was the number one quarterback in this class. So that's obviously going to be the focal point of the Jags season is, are you getting the 18th quarterback in the NFL? Are you getting the 14th quarterback in the NFL, which, I project a great rookie season with probably some learning curves, so a little bit of balance of both with this projection in this video. Or is he just that day one elite quarterback? Does he play like Patrick Mahomes in his first season as a starter? And are the Jags like legit playoff contenders in year one, which I don't think is out of the realm of possibilities. So their entire season, a lot of it focusing on Trevor Lawrence and his development. And then you have Gardner Minshew as the backup in the conversation for the best backups in the NFL. I actually did a video focusing on Gardner Minshew if you want to check it out. About week 4 of last season, just kind of talking about, can he be a full-time starter? Can he be a franchise quarterback? And my short answer to that was probably not, but I do think he can be kind of a stable top 32 quarterback in the NFL, in that sort of Andy Dalton breadth of starting caliber quarterbacks that you're just kind of always looking to upgrade. But yeah, I love Gardner Minshew's game. There's a lot to like about him. He's obviously got physical limitations, but he's super smart. Like when he goes against zone coverages, he can pick them apart. When you go against a lot of man-heavy teams, that's where you see issues because he doesn't have the arm talent to throw tight window throws, and he's not an amazing athlete to beat you with his legs when they give up those rushing lanes for the quarterback. So he has some limitations, and it really just comes down to that. But I am excited to see Gardner Minshew eventually get another starting opportunity somewhere. It seems inevitable. I don't know why some teams didn't trade for him, to be honest. Maybe he wasn't really available for Jacksonville. But I'm a big Gardner Minshew fan. I'm excited to eventually see him start again someday. Got Jake Luton as QB3, CJ Beathard as QB4. I guess that's a competition. It doesn't really matter. Luton did some fun things last year, so I'll be pulling for him to get that job. You know, Urban Meyer's been throwing a lot of bones to former Big Ten players, and I think CJ Beathard was one of them. I don't really see how Beathard fits in here. But yeah, the quarterback grade as a whole ranking 14th, and I have high expectations for Trevor Lawrence. You'll actually see that I project him to be the best quarterback in the AFC South in 2021, and that's ahead of Ryan Tannehill, Carson Wentz. Now that's definitely considering, Watson not playing, but yeah, big expectations for Trevor Lawrence in year one. Let's talk about the running back room. So you got Travis Etienne coming in here with the first round pick. So I gave that grade, I graded that pick a C-. I thought there was other areas that this team could have and should have looked to upgrade in the first year of this new regime, and definitely some red flags with the college coach coming in, not really understanding positional value and taking Travis Etienne for the same team that, picked up James Robinson, who was the best rookie running back in a great class last year as an undrafted free agent. So definitely worth being critical of the Jags for that decision, but without droning on about the draft value and the grade of that pick, it doesn't mean Travis Etienne is a bad football player. He's an amazing running back. I thought he would have been the best running back in last year's class and probably the year before that. I compare him to Alvin Kamara. So yes, he will upgrade some things. Is he going to upgrade the running game as a whole? I don't know if he necessarily moves the needle there with James Robinson already there. You could probably nitpick between Robinson and Etienne who's the better runner. At the end of the day, it's just a stylistic preference, and I will say that Etienne brings something to the table that you didn't get in James Robinson with that speed threat. So you're going to get a very nice balance of these two, both really good running backs. They're actually going to rank 11th in the league for total running back grade, and I think Travis Etienne very well could be a top 10 running back in the NFL year one, because that's just how the nature of the running back position goes. If you want to talk about fantasy football with these two, I'm definitely disappointed. I have James Robinson in pretty much every fantasy league I play in, and those of you that watched this series last year probably did too, because that was a really good call of mine that James Robinson was going to be the starter here, or had a good chance to be the starter and was worth picking up. And now all of a sudden he's just splitting carries. He's going to be kind of this average fantasy running back. But really nice 1-2 punch there, thunder and lightning approach. I'm sure you'll hear that on the broadcast throughout the year. And then they do bring back Carlos Hyde. So he's back. He's their RB3, versatile guy. He's had a really nice career. Carlos Hyde's a good running back. Maybe even a little underrated at this point in his career. So love having him as RB3. Can do a little bit of everything if you had injuries. You got Dare, you got Divine Ozigbo, Nathan Cottrell. They're going to battle it out for RB4 if they even keep 4 running backs, but those guys aren't really factoring in here. So the running back grade going to be 11th. We'll hear a little bit more about these guys' receiving abilities when we get to the receiving grade here. So let's transition there to that receiving grade. DJ Chark at the top of the receiving depth chart. Love me some DJ Chark. I spent a lot of time trying to remind people of my good takes. DJ Chark was one of my bad takes. I'll admit it. I did not think he was a great pick in the second round. Wasn't really all that great in LSU, but gets to Jacksonville. In year one, I looked right. And then year two, boom. So that's a great reminder for all around the NFL, but also a lot of players on this team that had rough rookie seasons that you can't write a guy off after that first rookie season. So he's been awesome, man. He's had back-to-back outstanding seasons, and really that second year was amazing. He looked like a potential number one, and potentially still has some limitations if you want to talk about can he be, Devontae Adams, Keenan Allen, Julio Jones, that alpha number one do-it-all X-receiver from a kind of elite separator standpoint, the guy that you can have him run the entire route tree. Like, you could get nitpicky and say he might be capped at being a really high-end number two. I think we're still getting those answers, but he is outstanding. You love what you have there, and his ability as a deep threat, this guy with 4.3 speed at 6'4", does everything you like. His skill set paired with Trevor Lawrence, who throws such an amazing deep ball, you could see true lightning in a bottle with this connection here. And, you want to talk about fantasy football, like DJ Chark should be probably bumped up a little bit getting Trevor Lawrence in there. And I think he will be, at least this year, this team's alpha X wide receiver. Then they bring in Marvin Jones. I'm a little less excited about this signing than other people. I just think he has definitely began to regress. He's still a weapon. He's still a quality number two, but I would say he's towards the bottom as far as number two receivers in the NFL, like bottom 10 as number two receivers. Outstanding ball skills, contested catch, reliable threat, but just not separating at a high level anymore, and never has been an elite separator. So a good number two, it's fine. Just maybe a little bit overhyped this offseason, in my opinion. Laviska Shenault, I have really big expectations for this year. I was a big fan of Laviska Shenault, and I love how he fits into this. The system, we're still going to learn a lot about what kind of offense they're going to run here, but I do expect a lot of screens and West Coast concepts and spread concepts. And with Laviska Shenault, I think he's going to fit in there really well. See a lot of stuff in the RPO game, bubble screens. This is a typical just put the ball in his hands playmaker type of receiver. Not necessarily a polished route runner, but does have outstanding catch and traffic ability as well. So really excited to see what Laviska Shenault can do here. It's not like they really invested that much in this receiving group, so he's going to have a big opportunity to step up, and he has a good chance to kind of make Marvin Jones an afterthought and be the number two receiver here, whereas he slides into the slot and Marvin Jones plays on the outside in 11 personnel. But then you also have Colin Johnson, who actually had a better rookie season than I thought he would. A lot of people like contested catch receivers. I really don't. I think this is probably his ceiling, is like a good fourth wide receiver, a guy that can be that reliable contested catch guy, but not someone you necessarily want on the field all the time because he's just not a reliable separator. Doesn't always work that way, but just with his athletic traits, he's going to have some of the stiffness and a lack of separation route running ability. So I love him as a wide receiver 4. I don't know how much better he's going to get than that. But then you also have Philip Dorsett they brought in here. We'll see if he makes the team. That's going to come down to, I think, Jalen Camp and Josh Imatorbhebhe, a 7th-round pick for Camp and a great undrafted pickup for Imatorbhebhe. I'll talk about them in just a second. They do have Jamal Agnew, who might play some of the same stuff that Laviska Shenault gets there, but a converted corner coming over with Darrell Bevell. He's got upside. He's just learning a new position, so I don't think you count on him too much in the receiving game. Anything you get from him on offense is house money. This is Jamal Agnew we're talking about, but he is going to be a phenomenal kick returner. That is why they paid him. Now, I thought he was a little bit overpaid in free agency, to be honest. Counting, with how much they paid him, which is like, I think, $6 million a year, if not more. You kind of need to see him contribute on offense, so I think they will try to make that work. I just wasn't all that impressed by what we saw from him as that kind of gadget player in the offense for Detroit last year. But yeah, Jalen Camp, Josh Imatorbhebhe, I do think this is an open competition for the 6th wide receiver spot. Jalen Camp, an underutilized freak athlete out of Georgia Tech, unbelievable run blocker, just as Josh Imatorbhebhe is two of the best run blockers in this class at large. So interesting that they went with those, but these guys have some upside as receivers as well, not just as blockers. At Camp, we just don't know a lot about him, but all the athletic traits in the world, and in a good spot where he can be that 6th receiver and develop. And then you have Josh Imatorbhebhe, who I think is actually a better day one receiver, much more productive player at Illinois. Outstanding contested catch ability, can jump out of the gym. I think he has like a 47-inch vertical, and a sneaky athlete. So my comparison for him was actually Zach Pascal, who Jags fans are probably familiar with on the Colts. Just a really solid physical receiver. So I love those two additions just as, flyers on late investments. And then Terry Godwin, slot guy out of Georgia, just hasn't really gotten anywhere in the NFL. You got John Vay Johnson, decent athlete, probably won't make the team. Hammond and Jones also probably out here. So going to have some interesting battles towards the bottom of the depth chart there, and overall just a good receiving group. The tight end room is tough to look at here. You have Chris Manhertz, who they bring in from Carolina. Outstanding blocker, but not much as a receiver, so don't like that as your number one tight end. James O'Shaughnessy, good balance, kind of number 2 caliber tight end. So you got kind of 2 backup caliber guys fighting for the starting job. They draft Luke Farrell out of Ohio State, kind of getting that Ohio State bias here a little bit. I did think it was a draftable prospect, one of the best blocking tight ends in the leagues. In the class. So decent pick there, but probably never going to be a starter. And then they're probably going to have an open competition here with the last 4 or the last 3 for that tight end 4 spot. So you're going to have Tyler Davis, who was a 6th-round pick out of Georgia Tech, kind of a similar thing to Jalen Camp out of Georgia Tech, just underutilized as a receiver. But what can he do in year 2 as a drafted player last year? Don't actually know a ton about Tyler Davis, but I think he will compete. You got Ben Ellefson, kind of liked him out of North Dakota State. And then, of course, Tim Tebow. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on Tim Tebow. I'm pulling for him. I went on a pretty big rant about the whole Tebow doesn't deserve an opportunity BS that was going on in the media. I mean, it was just so unnecessary, all the hate that Tebow got. I would love to see him come in and make this team, but as you can see here, he's a long shot to make this team. But I would love it if he emerged, but definitely not even really expecting him to make the team, but I would love to see it. So that's kind of where I stand on Tim Tebow. And then the running back contribution here, I think Travis Etienne is going to be a premier receiving back. That is the biggest upgrade. Bringing him in over James Robinson is just what he's going to be able to do in the receiving game. There's also all this noise about him playing slot receiver. We'll see. I mean, with Laviska Shenault and Agnew there, I don't know. It's pretty muddy as far as that kind of designed touch guy. I'm sure he'll get some of it in Jacksonville, but I think that was very much overrated as far as people freaking out saying, oh my God, they took Travis Etienne to play slot receiver. No, they didn't. He's going to be a running back. Definitely going to be their 3rd down running back, and I think he contributes at a very high level. Route running is take it or leave it, but just the athletic traits show up. He's got great hands, and he has that elite ability to just kind of catch it smooth and transition as he flips his hips and looks upfield, has a great sense of kind of where the defense is and angles and how to make that first guy miss. And then once he gets that open lane, look out. He has outstanding speed and home run hitting ability as just a screen guy, a check down guy, and you can have him run routes as well. So the receiving grade is definitely helped by Travis Etienne. And so the grade as a whole is going to come in 24th here. So a solid, good group of receiving threats here for the Jags and Trevor Lawrence. And now let's move on and talk about the offensive line for the Jacksonville Jaguars. So I'm worried about the tackle play. I love the Walker Little pick and how he kind of raises the floor there. And we'll talk more about Walker Little, who I don't think starts year 1. But Cam Robinson playing on the franchise tag. A lot of people were hard on the Jags for that. It made sense. They knew they probably wanted to draft a tackle, but they weren't sure who they were going to get. And it just kind of made it so they don't necessarily have to worry about the left tackle position. They're obviously still worried about it. They wouldn't have drafted Walker Little if they weren't. But yeah, Cam Robinson, there hasn't been a lot of development in his career, which is the biggest concern. At least in Jawan Taylor's case, he's got a lot of football still to show. And we've seen a lot of these, I know Taylor and Robinson were 2nd-round picks, but in that same breath, with guys like Garrett Bowles and Colton Miller, who took 4 or 5 years to become those top tackles. And in Cam Robinson's case, he's gotten the playing time. The development hasn't been there. So you're really not expecting that at this point. He's kind of a swingman, low-end starter at this point. But I do think he starts. You just don't feel great about that. And then Jawan Taylor, you really need to see that step up in year 3 now for Jawan Taylor. He's been okay. But you got to see more from him before you're focused in on him as your long-term tackle. So that's why I like the Walker Little pick so much. I talked a ton about him as one of my guys in the draft. Someone that had his college career derailed and had a couple things gone differently, a potential like top 20 pick. 5-star prospect coming out of high school, promising first couple years there, but tears his ACL, misses his junior season, and then opts out in his senior year, which you can't really hold against him. So looked in shape at his pro day, and you hope that he can hit the ground running sooner rather than later, and ideally he can show you something. Maybe he impresses enough in practice, you start him over Cam Robinson by the end of the year, and then because Robinson's only on that 1-year contract, if you can let Robinson go and if Walker Little was a good pick. So I am optimistic about Walker Little, but you're probably not getting much of an impact from him, I would say, in the first maybe half or even 2/3 of the season. And then the center situation, you love Brandon Linder, one of the top centers in the NFL, one of the more underrated players in this league. So feel great about that. He's going to help things here. And then you got Norwell and AJ Cann, also pretty underrated. So I do like the interior group there. You also have Ben Bartch, who was a 4th-round pick last year. We haven't gotten to see a ton of Ben Bartch, but I like him. I think he can be at least a really good backup. And then Tyler Shatley, awesome flexibility. He's one of the better backup interior pieces. He would start for a lot of teams, I think. So you're really running pretty deep here. You got 8 deep on the offensive line, which you feel pretty good about. You got flexibility. Bartch can step out and play tackle as well. Shatley can play center or guard. So overall, it's not a bad offensive line. It's going to rank 18th in the league. But I am a little worried about that tackle situation. I thought they maybe could have done a little more to upgrade that combo of tackles, knowing that they were going to be bringing Trevor Lawrence in here. 18th for the offensive line grade. It's just kind of a solid offensive line with some question marks at tackle that I don't feel very good about, but the interior is one of the best in the league. So the offense as a whole, I rank 22nd. I think they're going to have a very functional offense, but definitely some learning curves. As far as the offensive coaching, I have a lot to be convinced of with Urban Meyer and Darrell Bevell. I do like Darrell Bevell. I think he's one of the 32 best play designers in the league, for whatever that's worth, but he was available for a reason. I think, you're going to have a well-balanced offense, and I think we're going to see this be very much a spread offense as well. I think we're going to see a lot of influences, of course, from the Ohio State spread offense that is replicated across college football, but even down towards Clemson. I think there's a lot of similarities there, but I think we see a healthy cross of Darrell Bevell's NFL influence, Urban Meyer's college influence, and Trevor Lawrence getting a say as well in the kind of systems he liked to run at Clemson. I think we do see a lot of RPOs and stuff in this offense because that's just something that Lawrence was very comfortable with at Clemson. So a lot of quick-hitting horizontal passes, trying to set up some deeper shots off of that stuff, a lot of runs out of shotgun. A big reason why ETN was a focal point there, probably better in those situations than James Robinson. And that's kind of what I'm expecting. It's just a good, solid spread offense here in Jacksonville. So let's transition now to the defensive side of the ball. We're going to start with the run defense here, which was definitely a big focus of this team this offseason. They were, either the worst or second worst run defense last year. So with the new culture, the whole overhaul of the team here, they brought in a lot of new pieces here, and that's always going to be kind of a way that they can try to kind of set a culture, set the tone, is being that tough mindset, run defending team. It's something this team is clearly very focused on. So a lot of moving pieces. As you can see here, I'm painting it as a 3-4 base front. It's going to be very multiple. They're going to move things around. But, with Joe Coley coming over from Baltimore, or Joe Cullen rather, I do expect a lot of 3-4 influences, just like we had in Baltimore. So that's just the way I'm painting this right now, even if it is very multiple. So some of these pieces might be deployed differently. This is just my projection of this defense, my best projection rather. So that projection is actually going to include Devon Hamilton starting at that nose tackle position, as that is kind of where the tone starts with the run defense. That's why we start with that interior core of the defensive line. So I actually think Malcolm Brown is a better run defender right now, but Hamilton was a third-round pick last year. You have that Ohio State bias coming from this coaching staff. And I just think they're going to want to see more snaps from Devon Hamilton, and I think they can actually realistically expect a significant uptick in his abilities in year 2. It was just a rough year for all defensive rookies, but especially on the defensive line, just a lack of playing time, and we didn't really see any early contributors from that defensive tackle class, and I think that's going to change in year 2. And Hamilton was obviously one of the better ones from last year. Now, he is not much of a pass rusher at all, but I think from a run defense standpoint, I think they want to see what they can get from him. Whereas Malcolm Brown, more experienced, probably a stronger, more disciplined player right now on a 1-year deal, just kind of a Band-Aid piece right there. I think they would love to see Devon Hamilton cement himself as that core guy on the front. So he'll be a big pivot point for this run defense grade on how good it can be based on how he plays. But then you have your kind of defensive ends in this system. I like how Roy Robertson-Harris and Taven Bryan theoretically project as base 3-4 defensive ends. Taven Bryan was a bit of a tweener coming out of Florida, and I thought his best scheme fit was going to be just like this, as that hybrid 3-4 end. And he's had an up and down career, a bit of a laughing stock, because myself and a lot of people criticize this pick. They're like, why are you not taking Lamar Jackson instead of a rotational defensive lineman in Taven Bryan? And that has very much played out, but he's still a guy with some upside, and I think this is a huge year for him. He was drafted in 18. I can only assume they didn't pick up his 5th-year option, so this would be a contract year for him. And in this new system, you pair that upside with Devon Hamilton, you can start to generate some excitement there. And that's only the beginning of the potential excitement for this front. Roy Robertson-Harris, good quality, underrated veteran signing here, was an outstanding all-around defensive end for the Bears in limited playing time. Now, he had a much better surrounding unit there, so there's some questions on if he can hold his own without, Akeem Hicks next to him and Eddie Goldman and Khalil Mack drawing attention. So that's very much a question mark, but really athletic guy, and again, kind of like Taven Bryan, perfect fit as a 3-4 defensive end, just as he was for the Bears. And you've got some depth on the interior as well. We mentioned Malcolm Brown. Doug Costin was an excellent undrafted pickup last year, defended the run at a very high clip for an undrafted guy, and I love how he fits as well. He's a smaller guy. I love how he fits in as a defensive end here. They draft Jay Tufele, again, kind of a smaller dude, but quick feet, maybe more of a pass rusher than a run defender early on. But he should get into the rotation here as a 4th-round pick this year. And then you have Jihad Ward, has a lot of experience. I think Cullen is familiar with him from Baltimore. And then you have Adam Gotsis, veteran, bigger-bodied guy, kind of a poor man's Roy Robertson-Harris in a lot of ways. So they run really deep. They've got, 8 deep on the interior. I think that's probably the cutoff there with Adam Gotsis. Ross, Aquale, Randall, don't expect much from them. But if nothing else, they're going to have an excellent multiple rotation, a lot of positional flexibility with all these guys. So it's a fun front, although not dominant. And then the edge run defense contribution here, it's not good. It's going to drag this down. K'Lavon Chesson just might be the worst run defending edge player in the NFL heading into 2021, and I think they're going to keep him out there a lot just to see how he can hold up. So keep an eye on that. I think, like Tennessee, they're going to be able to run right at K'Lavon Chesson just like they did last year, and he can't really get off blocks. He's not this amazing tackler. You hope he takes steps up in that department, but he is a thin player, and I would be worried about that in run defense. And Josh Allen as well, he has beefed up, and I think I'm actually projecting him to take a step up in run defense as a 3-4 outside linebacker instead of that hand-in-the-dirt defensive end. I think he will be much more comfortable there, which you could actually say the same thing about Chesson. Just when you're off the ball and you're one of these freaky athletes, I think it's a little easier to lean on kind of your bend and quick twitch athleticism to maybe work around blocks a little bit more, whereas as a hand-in-the-dirt defensive end, it's much more traditional, strength matters, you got to get your hands inside and shed. I think as an outside linebacker, you see a little bit more of that craftiness show up. So you hope that the new system works really well for those guys in run defense, but both kind of play later. Josh Allen, I think, has beefed up since his Kentucky days, but I would say the perimeter run defense is a concern here. The linebackers are really solid. Miles Jack, great run defending, middle linebacker, no questions there. Myles Jack has actually become a little bit underrated as his career has gone on. And then Joe Schobert is fine. He's just kind of a do-it-all balanced linebacker. Definitely overpaid here. I never would have brought him in here, but he is there. He's fine. As far as depth at those two positions, the edge depth, I'm excited to see. Dwayne Smoot kind of is what he is. He's an edge 3, a better pass rusher than run defender. So we'll talk a little bit more about with the pass rush there. But Leon Jacobs, keep an eye on him in this multiple front because he could be an early down substitution for K'Lavon Chaisson if you're really worried about him, and that would be an upgrade here. I just don't know how much they're going to do that. Jacobs played that hybrid outside linebacker role at Wisconsin, and he would fit in perfectly there. He can cover really well. He's got off-ball experience in the NFL now. I think he would have an increase in his run defense ability as that more on-ball linebacker in a 3-4 system. So Leon Jacobs theoretically projects outstanding in this system. So do keep an eye on that to upgrade this ranking by the end of the season. They bring in Jordan Smith out of UAB. I just was not a Jordan Smith guy. I think he's super light, can't convert speed to power, didn't see an ounce of development, was super concerned by his workout. So I don't know. I have really low expectations for Jordan Smith. I'm just not a fan of that player. Laurenti McRae, we'll see if he even makes the team. But the inside linebacker group, a lot of depth here. You got Shaq Quarterman, who didn't even see the field last year as a 4th-round pick out of Miami. You'd love to see what he could do at some point. I don't see him fitting in, getting a lot of playing time this year either, but he has some good upside. Really nasty physical thumper out of Miami. He does lack some coverage ability. Damian Wilson, veteran, whatever. Don't really feel like spending a lot of time on Damian Wilson. Just pure depth right there. Quincy Williams, a converted safety, was probably a better scheme fit for that 4-3 kind of weak side, almost big nickel safety position that they used to run. So going to be tough to see how he projects into this system. Dakota Allen, unathletic, depth there. Dylan Moses being kind of the big wild card here. He was at one point viewed as a first-round linebacker prospect out of Alabama and a fan favorite in this draft class just because of the initial hype on his career, but suffered a pretty serious lower body injury and just never got back to it and really played poor in his final year for Alabama. In fact, so poor that he fell out of the draft entirely. They get him as an undrafted pickup, and the player that played in 2020, I get it. He wasn't an impact player. He's not a great athlete. Very hard to see the role he could have in the NFL. But you dial up his tape from years before that, and you're like, yeah, he's a better player than Joe Schobert. So big wild card there. Really good run defender, physical player, but that's got decreased value in the NFL. So it's more of the coverage ability, the sideline-to-sideline speed. That's the question mark with Dylan Moses, and can that come back? And I think whether or not he makes this team will be an indicator of if he's got some of that juice back. Otherwise, he might end up on the practice squad. And then they even have Chappelle Russell, who the Bucs drafted. Probably not going to make the team, but good athlete. So the run defense grade is going to come in 25th here, which is an upgrade from, like I said last year, probably 31st in the league. A lot of moving pieces and a lot of potential to be better than that. I don't think it's going to be a run defense that breaks this team's season, but I think some of the better running teams will also be able to pick their spots to attack in this front as well. So let's move on to the pass rush grade. This is probably my biggest concern. Not probably. This is definitely my biggest concern for this team as a whole and why I think this defense could ultimately underwhelm a little bit. So Josh Allen is here. You love Josh Allen. He's developed well. I don't really have anything bad to say about Josh Allen. I wouldn't say he's an alpha. I wouldn't say he's a number one. I think he has the potential to get there. Just a young player that we still have a lot to learn about. Was much better in his rookie season because he was healthy. So you expect him to have a nice year this year. Probably expecting about 50, 60 pressures, maybe 10 sacks. A good kind of number 2 edge rush season from him. So he's the focal point of the pass rush. I like what you have there a lot. Beyond that, you got just major question marks across the board. Your other edge, we aren't even sure if K'Lavon Chaisson, who's going to be the starter for the most part, is their best number 2 edge rusher. And that's saying a lot. Because you got Dwayne Smoot there, who they extended. They brought him back. He's a good third rusher. I like Dwayne Smoot. But K'Lavon Chaisson, they spent that first-round pick last year on him. Very up and down season, but I will say that a lot of people are completely writing him off. As we learned from DJ Chark on this team, you can't do that. He came on late, and I like K'Lavon Chaisson. He was always going to be a guy that was going to take some time. Really young, undersized guy coming out of LSU. I think Josh Allen, if he can kind of be that mentor in a lot of ways, even though he's so young, to Chaisson, because Allen beefed up a lot as well, but he did a lot sooner than Chaisson was able to pull it off, because Allen, as a rookie, had already beefed up from his Kentucky days. But K'Lavon Chaisson, a ton of upside, elite get-off, elite bend, just kind of a high-motor player, but needs to develop that power, as we kind of talked about, and just the skill set as a whole. You can't just be Vic Beasley and just run around guys in the NFL, especially nowadays with how athletic these offensive lines are. So massive wild card, K'Lavon Chaisson. He is going to be a pivot point for this defense as a whole, because if he cannot cement himself as a quality number 2 here, you're in a lot of trouble with this pass rush, because you're totally leaning on Josh Allen. The interior pass rush is not very good either. Roy Robertson-Harris is fine, but he was, the Bears' 5th or 6th best pass rusher, and that allowed him to contribute. He can't be this team's 2nd best pass rusher. It's just not going to get you the results you want. Taven Bryan is the wild card with the upside there. Playing a different role here in a contract year. You really are leaning on Taven Bryan and K'Lavon Chaisson, 2 former first-round picks, to look like the guys that you wanted at this point in their career when you drafted them. So that's just kind of where the starting group lies. As far as the depth, edge depth, you got Dwayne Smoot as kind of a emergency starter, I would say. So that's fine. But Leon Jacobs, kind of a hybrid edge off-ball linebacker here, not really much of a pass rusher. You have some speed off the edge there in Jordan Smith. I hope I'm wrong about him. I hope he's really good at the next level. I don't get excited about that pick personally. I get it if you are, because he's long and explosive and can get off the ball, but man, there's just so much to work with there. I would be stunned if you get 15 pressures from Jordan Smith in his rookie year. The interior defensive line depth, you're not getting a ton. Jihad Ward is kind of a pocket pusher, but he's been more of an edge, kind of early down guy in his career. Jay Tavale would be the one guy you look at. Just a rookie at a USC. Hard to count on him as a 4th-round pick to be a high-impact player as a rookie, but I thought he was the better pass rusher between him and Marlon Tuipulotu. So I would say of all these guys, if anyone's going to emerge as a starter next to Taven Bryan or Robertson-Harris, it would be Tufele. But yeah, it's just a really bad pass rush. I'm sorry. I like Josh Allen, and I think K'Lavon Chaisson can get there. It's just so difficult to project him to do that. And the interior guys, to count on Taven Bryan in year 4 because it's a contract year, it's just a massive, massive reach in my opinion. So they're going to rank 31st in the NFL for pass rush. My biggest concern, and frankly a significant factor for why the Jags ultimately ended up 30th in these power rankings. So that's going to be your biggest red flag for the defense. Linebacking group is really solid. We kind of talked about these guys already, but Miles Jack is a total star. Colts fans are going to hate me for this, but I actually think he's a little better than Darius Leonard. I think those two guys are probably in the debate for the 5th best linebacker in the NFL, in my opinion. But now any Colts fans watching this are just going to come and attack me because they think Darius Leonard's the best linebacker in the NFL. He's not, but is what it is. Miles Jack makes this linebacking grade really solid, 7th in the league. Joe Schobert's fine. I'm just not a big Joe Schobert guy. He uses his length well, but he's just not a great athlete. He can't really man anybody up, but he can disrupt passing lanes. As a number 2 linebacker, he's fine. Obviously not bad enough to drag this down. And then whoever is behind him, that's really up in the air. I would think Shaq Quarterman would be the next man up. 4th-round pick last year, year 2 in the league. Figure some things out. He's a good athlete, really instinctive player. I would think he would be the next guy up, but there's no guarantee there. You got Damian Wilson, veteran guy. They might go that route in the event of injury. Again, Quincy Williams, kind of weird to see how he fits in this system. He could potentially be like a dime linebacker upgrade to Joe Schobert, but probably not. And then Dylan Moses being the wild card that we talked about there. But You're really only looking at probably 2 linebackers playing a significant role for this team, and they got 2 good ones. One great one and one solid one. So the linebacker grade, going to be 7th in the league. Really good group of linebackers. Then the defensive backs. I am really excited to see how Cullen decides to use this secondary as a whole, corner and safety. A lot of question marks just as far as deployment and how these guys are going to be used on the field, and then schematically, what do they decide to do? Now, I'm personally projecting kind of an attacking 3-4 defense that's going to be like Baltimore, running a lot of man coverage because, for one, you're bringing in the guy that ran that system in Baltimore, but just personnel-wise, C.J. Henderson, Shaq Griffin, and Tyson Campbell, personally, I think are best in kind of bump and run man coverage systems. So we don't know if that's going to be what they focus on, but if they do, I really like how those pieces work for this defense. So C.J. Henderson has been mostly a zone corner to this point in his career, so he's comfortable in zone, but with his athletic traits, you would lump him in with like Stephon Gilmore, Jair Alexander, like elite athletic movement skills, good press guy as well. So if they're going to go more man coverage, I think year 2 could be great for C.J. Henderson. And then Shaquille Griffin, you can say the exact same thing. He's been in the Seattle zone cover 3 system, but that's never really fit his skill set all that well. I would say he's a more athletic player than a heady player. So, with his back turned to the quarterback a little more, bump and run coverage, 2 players that we haven't seen them run a system like that in their NFL career, certainly, and I think could really elevate in a world where they're blitzing a lot, generating pressure up front, and saying, you two, take the number 1, take the number 2 receiver, and take them out of the play for 3 or 4 seconds. And I really like the upside and the thinking if that's the direction they go. So I said I'm excited to see them deploy this unit, and that's a big focal point of that. And the drafting of Tyson Campbell really sells me on that even further. Because, they got Sidney Jones, they got Trey Herndon. Those guys are fine, but if you want to run a legitimate man coverage bump and run system, look at New England, look at Miami. Those teams wanted to run 3 deep plus at really good true cover man corners. So Tyson Campbell, I think, can be that in year 1. Can be. He's got to beat out Sidney Jones and technically Trey Herndon, but Trey Herndon's just not very good, even though he's played a lot. Tyson Campbell, I thought, was an excellent fit for that sort of man-heavy bump and run type of style. Just a good all-around balanced corner, underrated player in this draft class. So you have excellent potential with that corner group. Just we need to see it. Then you got good depth, Sidney Jones, Trey Herndon. They might just go with those 5. Clay Brooks, a 7th-round pick last year. Barku, DJ Daniels, interesting. I don't see him making the team. Really quick-footed dude out of Georgia, an undrafted free agent pickup for them. But probably a better strong safety because he just is so slow. But a smart player with really quick feet. But then the safety group, a lot of question marks, but I don't hate it. So Rashawn Jenkins has never been like a great safety for the Chargers, and I would classify this as an overpay in free agency, but he's still a quality starter, and they needed an upgrade there. And then you have Gerard Wilson, who is very similar, 6'2", 210 pounds, bigger-bodied safety type there. So another situation where I'm curious how these guys are deployed and what kind of coverages are they going to run. Are they going to ask these guys to man dudes up a lot? Are they going to ask these guys to play single high free safety? Because in cover 1 systems, Rashawn Jenkins and Gerard Wilson are probably not the first 2 safeties that come to my mind as far as scheme fit there. Both of those guys I think of kind of that cover 3 strong safety. Now, Rashawn Jenkins, despite being 6'3", 220 pounds, has actually been a decently rangy free safety. I think you could do better. I think there's more rangy free safeties that you could get there, and that's part of the Andre Sisco selection. Curious to see, again, what kind of coverages they run. How do those 2 guys fit in? I do think those 2 are your best safeties in year 1, but I don't think Gerard Wilson is a lock to start. Andrew Wingard was a really solid undrafted player last year, a second-year guy. if you go back to my 2019 Jags deep dive, I was talking up Andrew Wingard as one of the better undrafted free agent pickups. So he has, I would say, solidified himself as a quality NFL safety. Starter, that's debatable, but had some really good moments last year, and I think will push Gerard Wilson potentially, as will Andre Sisco. A third-round pick, a high third-round pick out of Syracuse. He's a downhill free safety, very, very tight. So I would be worried about him running man coverage, especially in year one, but just period. I think him and Rayshawn Jenkins are a little bit redundant as far as their skill set. I think they're very downhill players, not really lateral skill sets. So I don't really picture us seeing Andre Sisco in year one a ton just based on skill set alone. But again, I don't know exactly what kind of system they're going to run here. You've got Josh Jones, who actually was racking up tackles last year, but probably just, not going to start, simply put. Like, probably just a special teamer if he makes the team. And then Daniel Thomas is a good, strong safety prospect that I actually thought was a good value pick for them last year. Rudy Ford they bring in for special teams, and Watson there, same thing, a couple veterans. I'm not crazy about this safety group. I do think it's better than last year, but I don't see a great cover player in this safety group. I see a lot of smart, physical players, but I'm just a little worried about this team giving up a lot of deep passes, because if they're going to go a man-heavy system, I'd be worried about the pass rush, and I'd be worried about the safety group providing safety over the top, but just coverage underneath as well, because usually in cover one of these guys is going to have to man up a tight end or man up a slot receiver, and Gerard Wilson, Wingard, Sisco, Josh Jones, I don't trust any of them to be that guy. So that would be where my question marks lie. I love this group of corners, though. I think they're going to be super fun, and I'm excited to see the system that they run. I think they have a lot of different options as well, a lot of depth in this secondary. So they actually rank 14th. I think it's going to be a very kind of above average group in the secondary with some potential positions to exploit, but they're this deep at corner, so I think they can hide some of those problems at safety as well. So again, 14th for the secondary grade, which means the defense as a whole is going to rank 28th. You have a pass rush as poor as this, and question marks with the staff, and a lot of moving parts and problems with your safety group, and a young secondary. It's just not going to add up all that well. I think they have a very good chance to exceed this 28th ranking, but you're counting on a ton of growth from these young players working well in this system. Taven Bryan, Josh Allen, you're counting on all three of these corners to kind of show us something that they haven't necessarily to this point, which I think is a decent expectation, but it's just hard to count on that stuff. And then, you're hoping somebody can emerge as your number two safety and be a quality player as well. So just a ton of question marks, and typically that doesn't bode well, especially when you have such a poor pass rush, which tends to be what can elevate things on the defense really easily. So defensive coaching, I think, is fine, unproven, another area for potential improvement. Home field, Jacksonville just has never had a great home field advantage, let's face it, so they're towards the bottom there. And then schematically, we've kind of been over this. I am expecting a kind of attacking multiple 3-4 front, very similar to the Baltimore Ravens defense, but that's all up in the air. They're going to do their own things and could mix things up and do completely different coverages. Like they could be a cover 2 defense. For all I know, we will just have to wait and see to get confirmation on the types of coverages in the front that they're going to run. So a recap of the team overall, we've got the 22nd ranked offense, the 28th ranked defense, putting them here as the 30th overall team in the league. Special teams should be really good. You've got Josh Lambo, one of the best kickers in the league. I think this culture and the depth here should result in a really good coverage unit on kicks and stuff. So really expecting a good special teams group here. And the culture is just a complete question mark. They have so much to establish and so much to build here. I think you could see them exceeding this and this all working, but it's tough. It's tough. If rebuilding a program, it's easy to look at the team on paper and say the right things in the press conference, but you've got to put it to action as well. So I don't expect this to be some insane culture in year one, but you should also expect some significant growth there as well. And then to recap the strengths and weaknesses of this team, I put promise at quarterback in there because it's a real thing. When you show up to practice, you have a little bit of a different drive when Trevor Lawrence is your quarterback as opposed to, I don't know, Andy Dalton or, Drew Lock. It just helps you show up a little earlier, put in that extra rep in the gym or whatever it may be. It helps a lot. The running backs in general will be a significant strength here. And then a deep, versatile secondary, I think, is going to play well for this team and provide them a lot of options in the secondary and increase the floor of that defense a little bit. And then the weaknesses for this team, just a completely overhauled staff. There's going to be learning curves here. How extreme those are going to be, it's difficult to project. But just a lot of moving pieces and things to figure out, which when you compare a team like this to, say, I don't know, the Indianapolis Colts in this division, that they know what scheme or what drills they're going to run third period. They know who they can count on to be the captains of the defense. And all of these little integral pieces as far as culture and stuff, they just have so much to figure out. So that's going to be a weakness for this team. I think offensive tackle play is probably a weakness. I'm not the biggest Jawan Taylor fan. He probably takes a step up, but I would be worried about that combination of the offensive tackles paired with a potential weakness in Trevor Lawrence's game as far as not being an elite kind of play extender as far as sensing that pressure off the edge. And then the pass rush is the number one weakness, really. I think that's going to be what causes the most problems for this defense. I think they're going to have to blitz to generate pressure, and that can work. Baltimore's had a lot of success. It's not like they had a great pass rush last year. They generated pass rush through their blitzing. But are they going to get the right blitz calls? Is the coaching going to be right? Is that front going to understand that system and the hot zones and the drops and all that stuff? It takes time to establish a complex system like that. If they're just rushing four, I don't think this team gets a whole lot of pressure, and that's going to be an issue. And then let's wrap up and talk about this team's Vegas over-under and my win total expectations for this team. So their over-under is 6.5 wins, which is very ambitious for the team that won one game last year. So a long way to go to get there. I did give them the loss week 1 against Houston. Let's be honest, it's a very winnable game. Could easily give them that win. I had to give Houston one win, and that's the game I picked. So unfortunate draw there for Jacksonville. But I have them beating Denver at home. I have them beating Tennessee at home and actually beating Miami in London. Starting 3-3, which is a decent start to their season. Then they get their bye week, so maybe some buzz there if they can start well. But then it's a gauntlet. You got at Seattle, Buffalo, at Indianapolis, San Francisco. I have them losing all 4 of those off the bye week, kind of crushing their hopes a little bit. And then wrapping up the year 2-5 with 4 home games out of 7 there. So going 5-12 overall, with a floor for me of 4 wins and a ceiling of 9 wins. I'd be pretty surprised if this team was a playoff team. I think it would take the rest of the division completely falling apart. It looks like Houston's doing their job to fulfill that prophecy, but Indianapolis, you need Wentz to really suck, and Tennessee, you need all their moves to really not work out either. I don't see this team probably getting a wild card spot. I think it would have to come through pulling an AFC East style victory to this division with 8 or 9 wins. But again, it's in their ceiling. I don't think that that's impossible, especially with me projecting Trevor Lawrence to be the best quarterback in this division in 2021, which is probably the most positive outlook, the most positive thing I've said about the Jags in this deep dive. But that is it, man. That is the full preview of the Jaguars 2021 NFL season. My game plan here is to release one of these every 3 days. So I will announce on Twitter at TFG_football if that's going to change. It's going to have some fluctuation throughout the summer, but that's kind of the game plan, what you can expect moving forward. Again, guys, please do hit that like button down below. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any installments of this series. And also drop a comment down below. Let me know who you think comes next. Was this the right ranking for the Jags? What did you think of my breakdown of the players and the system and what we can expect for the Jags this year? Let me know all that stuff in the comments down below. I read every comment. I appreciate you guys interacting with the video. So until the next deep dive, guys, peace out, and we'll see you then.